Hello everyone. Welcome to today's informative session on Daksha Fellowship. I really hope you and your family are safe and doing well during these unprecedented times. I would like to introduce you to today's panelists. I am Nurita Karnik. I am an ex-student of Advocate Vasai Baptist College of Law. Um, I graduated in 2020. So currently I'm a technology law and policy fellow at the fellowship, and I'm doing my internship at Trilegal's TMT Law Department, which is in Bangalore. We have with us Anirudh, who is also a graduate from last year from School of Law, Christ University, Bangalore. He is a disputes resolution fellow, and he's currently doing his internship with some partners. We then have Vidushi Sinha, a 2020 graduate from Indraprastha University, Delhi. She is a law and regulations fellow. She is interning with Advocate Rahul Rai, who's an ex-partner at AZB's competition law department. She's also the co-founder of Corpus Juris, which is a law journal. She is also the founder and project lead of the not-for-profit organization Samarthya, which has been doing amazing work in the past year. It has helped migrant workers reach their villages. They have helped coordinating plasma and blood donations to COVID-positive patients. We are also joined today by our principal, Professor Vaishali Gura, ma'am, the chairperson of the Alumni Association of Advocate Vasai Baptist College of Law, Advocate Daksha Fellowship, and the secretary, Advocate Sudanva Pedekar. So I welcome you all, and with that, I think we can begin the presentation. Um, we have reserved some time for the presentation, question answers at the end. So you can drop in your questions in the chat box and we can answer them after the presentation. Yeah. Great. Um, all right. So just to give you a brief introduction about what Daksha Fellowship is, it is India's first law, policy and business fellowship. It is a one-year residential program at the Chennai campus. So currently they are offering two specializations. One is in technology, law and policy, which is what I have opted for. And the second one is disputes and regulatory practices. So this is from the next years, I mean, starting this year, there are two specializations. For us, we had three specializations. Right now, the disputes and resolutions are clubbed together. So disputes is being represented by Anirudh and regulatory is being represented by Vidushi. You can read more about the fellowship on our website. So today what we are doing is we are just essentially explaining what the fellowship entails, and we're sort of giving an exclusive sneak peek into the fellowship, which is not really available outside. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, great. Um, yeah. Uh, so just in our 2021 lives, technology has played an integral part on how we communicate with the world outside. There is an online equivalent to support all of our needs at the click of a button. So if you're hungry, there is Zomato, there's Swiggy. If you want to travel somewhere safely, there is Uber, there's Ola. We have online payment wallets. We have networking sites to stay connected. We even get this close to that theater experience in the comfort and safety of our homes. So that is what technology has brought to us, the ease of life. But with every such platform that is being built with new and ever-growing technology, there are a barrage of legal and regulatory issues that we are faced with. And these legal issues are some that are not really dealt with in earlier years. Some of these issues are so unprecedented that they are not predicted by our legislations while rolling out statutes. There are various regulatory bodies that have a tough time keeping up with these changes. Talking about dispute resolutions, we have seen a trend where lawyers are moving away from the age-old system of court litigation and moving towards other dispute resolution systems like international commercial arbitration, mediation, conciliation. So, keeping all these demands in mind, the Daksha Fellowship's curriculum was crafted by internationally renowned faculty along with leading legal practitioners and industry experts. Can we go to the next slide? Great. Um, so I remember when I had told my friends about getting selected for the fellowship, the first question that they asked was, "What is a fellowship?" And a lot of the students have also reached out to me and the other fellows about what is the difference between an LLM and a fellowship. So just to put it very simply, an LLM is more of a theoretical knowledge. So people opt for an LLM masters with the main aim of knowing the literature that goes behind it. A fellowship, on the other hand, is a postgraduate diploma course which specializes in a particular pathway, like an LLM, but it is tailored in a way where it aims to bridge the gap between theoretical learning and practical experience that the industry needs. So, plus an LLM is also set in its ways which rarely welcomes change, whereas the fellowship has a it's very quick and flexible to welcoming change in the trends. And I think we will see examples of this when we move on ahead to the subject section. Can we go ahead? Great. So I think I've covered this all, but so this is just a, 1 year residential program in Chennai. Are mandatory 8-week internship periods, something that all of us are going through right now. There is a vetting process to get selected, and I think Anirudh will go over that later on. We have collaborative learning and digital classrooms. Like I said, I will introduce our academicians ahead, and we are India's first legal fellowship. Can we go ahead? Okay. So, Daksha Fellowship is a postgraduate course which is provided by Sai University. Sai University came into existence due to KV Ramani sir. So, sir is a telecom entrepreneur in India and he is the co-founder of NASCOM. So, we've had the opportunity of interacting with him at the campus and it has truly been amazing. Can you go to the next slide? Great. So, like I mentioned, Daksha has been crafted by industry experts. We have a luminous board of advisors from the likes of Narayan Moosdi. Can you go to the next slide? Great. So we have people like Bharti Gupta Ramola consulting us. We have Sunita Reddy. We have a highly acclaimed and revered academic advisors committee and faculty board, former judges to partners of tier one law firms. We have professors who are reading law at international universities. Can we go to the next slide? These are just some of our faculty members. We will be talking about the way they teach, essentially their teaching methodologies, how they make the course interactive when we share our experience ahead in the subject section. Can we go ahead? Next slide. Okay, great. So how does the fellowship help your career? What opportunities does one have after the fellowship? So I'm really glad to tell you all that our current cohort is an amalgamation of fellows who have a very wide professional interest pool. We have associates who have worked and left their jobs in tier one law firms to get into regulatory practice, business and policy consulting. We have students who are done with their masters abroad and have come back for a much more practical approach to get into dispute resolution or corporate transactions. We even have fellows who have left litigation practice who want to work with think tanks to help solve policy issues for the government. We have fellows who aim to get into academics, research, training. So this is just what your future might look like after the Daksha Fellowship. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. So the core structure of the fellowship is based on a three-pillar approach. Firstly, the knowledge pillar, which encapsulates legal and non-legal courses. So what does this mean? The fellowship is a trimester-based system. The first term covers all the non-legal subjects, which were compulsory for all of us. The second and the third term comprises of the legal subjects, which are based on our specialization pathway. Secondly, there is expertise pillar, which essentially means that the specialty that we choose, it gives us a closer study of sectoral practice. And lastly, the skill set pillar that focuses on critical and personal skills. Next slide. Yeah. So, one of the USPs of this fellowship is the mandatory 8-week internship program that we are going through. A lot of us have been selected into various sectors in the legal fraternity. The fellows were selected for the internship with the help of a career support team, and there is a student run initiative, which is the Professional Development Committee, the PDC. The career support has helped us with tailoring our CV to match the needs of the specializations. They have helped us through internship aptitude tests along with interview training. Can we go to the next slide? So these are just a few places where our cohort is interning. Some of them are even going through their assessment internships. Can we go ahead? Great. So, boot camps. Now, this is super interesting. I don't think I've seen such an academic initiative in any graduate or postgraduate course. They are essentially intensive problem solving and learning activities which emphasize on team building and collaborative learning. So, just to give you an example of this, we have an accounting boot camp. So now accounting sounds very daunting to us lawyers. Maths is not really our strongest skill. So in our first term, we were taught the foundations of accounting, which are only necessary for lawyers. So it's not something to the level of what a CA reads or a CS reads, but something which can be used by a lawyer in his everyday life. So this boot camp was after this subject where we were given financial statements of various MNCs and no other information was provided to us. So we had to sit together as a team and analyze what is actually happening in the company in that year. So we had to analyze, oh, these assets were sold and these were acquired, these liabilities were gained. Um, so there was this once when we were given a pharmaceutical company's financial statement, and after we realized that in the last year they had gained a lot of assets, we realized it was due to the pandemic, and they were trying to come up with more products to help the demand. So I think this really helps those law students as well as lawyers who want to get into infrastructural law, due diligence, M&A, transactional laws, because making sense out of these financial statements plays an integral part in their daily lives. Another very interesting part was our 2-week law and technology boot camp where Mr. Bhavian Patel, he essentially taught us about computer programming in relation to legal material. So what that means is that he taught us about pseudo coding contracts. We learned about this software that he had developed called Carta. So Carta is essentially it is an interface which drafts for us. So it is essentially a preloaded template wherein information is put and the algorithm picks it up and makes it a contract. So essentially, we had to learn how to make that software. Now, again, we are lawyers, we are not coders. So we were very scared about this at the beginning. But he introduced us to this site where we learned how to code. It's called Scratch. And Scratch is actually used by second and third grade students right now to learn coding. And there we were like 23 to 30-year-olds trying to learn coding on that website. So what we did with Scratch was we came up with an algorithm that determined a case. So, for example, my team, we came up with an algorithm that determined whether a contract is valid, void, or voidable. Another team came up with an algorithm that determined whether a case was murder or culpable homicide. There was, I think, another team which made an algorithm which looked into whether a marriage is valid under the Hindu Marriage Act. So this, I think, was one of the most interesting boot camps personally. Can we go ahead? Yeah. Daksha was initially structured to be entirely offline, but due to the pandemic, they had to quickly transition into making the course a hybrid. We had our first term online, so from August to December we had it online, and then from Jan to March we had it offline at the Chennai City campus. The main campus is still being constructed. We were given access to a lot of research, a lot of online research material like SEC, Manupatra, Westlaw, and there were many more that were given. I think 6, 7 more were given. We also have a dedicated learning management system, or the LMS that we call it as. Can you go to the next one? Great. So communications lab. Now this was again a very interesting activity, a bunch of activities actually. This focused on improving our skills, which are essentially the bread and butter of lawyers. So speech, legal writing, presentation. So like just to give you an example, in our DPC, so we had a DPC comms lab, so that is drafting, pleading, conveyancing. It was headed by Siddharth Vedula, who's a partner at JSA. We were given drafting assignments, but they weren't just simple drafting assignments. All of the assignments had a quirky, special clause to it. For example, my team, which consisted of one person from every pathway, so there were three. I, as a tech law student, had to look into the data protection clause, keeping in mind that there is no data protection law in India. So, what will be the legality of that clause? A friend of mine who was from the regulatory pathway had to look into the regulatory body which would be monitoring the PDS system in that agreement. The disputes fellow and the team had to look into the dispute resolution clause between the government of Kerala and that software company. So, I think that was very interesting. Can you go to the next slide? So work and well-being. Now, Daksha pays special focus on personality development. We had sessions on mindfulness and counseling sessions, which I think were very helpful during the pandemic. Moreover, we learned on how to deal with the stress that is brought in a lawyer's life, plus how to handle toxicity in a law firm. We also had sessions on how to manage your personal finances and how to solve problems through critical thinking. And I think these things are usually learned with like time, age, and experience. But with these sessions, we now know how to invest the money that we earn as lawyers so that our future is secure and our money ends up making more money for us. Can you go to the next slide? Great. So now the thing that you all are here for, we are at the subjects criteria. So as you can see, there are two specializations. As a tech law student, we had subjects like data protection, telecom laws, IT law, competition law, and M&As this term. Now I have to just remind you that I had no prior experience in TMT law, so all the terminology that was being used was quite new to me. But everything was taught from the foundation. So just to go over the experience in the subjects, technology law was taught by Nikhil Narendran, who is a partner at Trilegal, and he heads one of the TMT law teams in Bangalore, where I'm interning. So the first few lectures were essentially him telling us about the history of telecom, how the TRI was set up, how TDSAT works. Then we went through the unified license, where we literally went through every single clause, where he gave examples of how it works in the industry. And in the later half of the course, when he had visited the campus, we moved on to discuss very complex topics like laws governing data centers, 5G, geospatial rules. So it was great to see how we started off with not knowing anything to be able to hold classroom conversations with a partner on such a niche topic. There was also a really great assignment that we did on where we analyzed the privacy policies of Airtel, Jio, VI, and BSNL. And by the way, telecom companies have all of your information. We did this analysis. If anyone is interested, we could like send it over to you. But if any of you all have BSNL, they don't have any privacy policy at all. Like they do, but it is as good as nothing. Then data protection. Data protection was taught by Malvika Raghavan. Before we studied India's PDP bill, we learned about other data protection regimes. So, data regimes in US, EU, so that is the GDPR, Brazil's new data protection law, which is the LGPD. After this was also taught to us by international experts who had played a role in the bill being passed. So it was essentially learning the bill firsthand from the maker himself or herself. Um, After we did all of this, we went through the PDP bill, and we went through the PDP bill clause by clause, word by word, trying to assess what the implications might be when the bill is enacted into an act. Um, and interestingly, our final assignment was making our own data protection bill. So because we had already gone through 4 bills, we knew what the best parts were, what the lacunas were. So we essentially came up with a Daksha data protection bill where we filled in all these lacunas, and I think that was really interesting. Lastly, then even IT. IT was taught by none other than Professor N.S. Napanai ma'am. So if you Google a book on IT laws in India, hers will be the first result that shows up. Um, the reason why I'm talking about her course was when I mentioned that this fellowship is very flexible. Uh, I would like to point out here that she started off with explaining the IT Act itself, but while we were learning about IT laws, the intermediary rules were rolled out. And if you've been following the news, you know the havoc that they have caused. So, one of the activities that she came up with on the spot was um, tailored towards these intermediary rules. So this activity was where the entire class was divided into 5 players. One that represented the wire, one that represented live law, one that represented the government, so essentially NITI. One was the court, and I think the other one was Twitter. So essentially, we had to read the plaint that was submitted in reality at the Delhi High Court and the Kerala High Court, and then we had to argue from different point of views, trying to understand how it affects different verticals. And because there was a player that was the court also came out with a judgment. So we already have a judgment in place, and I think it was quite interesting. So yeah, I think this was technology law. I'll just hand it over to Anirudh to explain the other half of the presentation.
Hey guys, hope you're all doing fine and safe. Thank you, Nurita, for that uh, briefing session. So I'll be dealing with disputes and regulatory practice. I'm more for disputes, guys, and I'm hoping Vidushi will chip in for the regulatory practice areas. So the beauty of the fellowship is that you can, audit courses, sit for other classes as such. So I had the, good luck of sitting for a few of the regulatory practice course also. So that is a good thing. So I'll just speak about disputes first. And honestly, I love it. So it's wonderful. Of course, everything. So when you think about disputes, you would ideally in India it would be like, okay, court litigation, we have to run to court, right? But the trend has changed, and we move into other factors. So arbitration is picking up, but international commercial arbitration is even picking up more in India right now, and we're looking into mediation, negotiation, conciliation, ODR as well. So these are all things you would ideally want to be, have skill sets for. But the beauty of the fellowship is that we had one more step, right? Dispute system design. So this is a subject usually not taught in India, and they taught us how a dispute system is designed, right? So when I say that, I'll give you an example of something I wrote a paper for. This particular term was about the IT system dispute systems, right? You'd ideally go for an income tax dispute and say you'd go to court, but IT also has a settlement mechanism wherein you would have a fair value pricing index. You would look into other aspects of the settlement commission as well. But these are all fallbacks for you. So you would ideally not want to litigate and you'd want to settle a dispute. But then the government came in the past 5 years, and they've been introducing scheme after scheme, either giving you immunity, either giving you tax waivers as such if you pay a particular fine. So these are all a dispute system. So how would you interact with them? How would you look into it? So this is something you will have to understand, because understanding a complex system like IBC has its own philosophy, right? So the waterfall mechanism. Ideally, you would learn all of this in a theoretical perspective, but learning it from a practical perspective from a person who's practiced it for a great number of years is wonderful. So our director is Chitra Narayan. She's like one of the world renowned mediators, and she was teaching us mediation, and she's part of the Supreme Court committee on the mediation bill who's drafted it. And the insights we get, the practical knowledge we get is something you would ideally probably go out, practice for a few years and get. So in a fellowship, you get it in a jiffy, and you understand the the implications what you'll have, right? So that's the beauty of a fellowship as such. And that's exactly what I experienced in the disputes pathway. I had a wonderful teacher who was teaching me from Geneva, from Geneva. So he was teaching me international commercial arbitrations. He gave away Saturday, Sunday, he sat with us. And it's not theory, like he's teaching me how to like draft a procedural order number one from the LCIA rules. Is letting me know how to like look into an award, like how to draft an award, but what would be the fallbacks of an award if you want to challenge it. So these are all skill set as a lawyer would need. So I'll move on to so just speaking a bit more about the pathway. So since they've combined disputes and regulatory practice as such, they've also created three specialized subclusters in that speed. So this is the advanced disputes cluster. That's presently what I'm pursuing. There's the infrastructure and sustainability cluster as well. So you'll probably be looking at like environmental law and that of an infrastructural need. So you need to balance it out. Like that's a very important concern over there. Now, corporate and financial cluster, you will be looking at your usual regulatory uh, 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 guardians over there from the RBI to other MCA, and what would be the implications by their actions. And all of these are very interlinked, right? So if you have an issue, you ideally want a settlement system, or if you want to look at a regulator. So these two courses come together perfectly, and that's what Daksha has done with this. Moving on to the next slide. So these are the knowledge pillars of Daksha. So fundamentals of public law. So we have an excellent teacher. I think practically speaking frankly, one of my favorite teachers, Dr. Madhav Khosla, who taught us like public law, technology, and governance. And it's one of the most defining courses I've had. And the curiosity I've had with this course is amazing. So he taught us something called as like geofencing warrants. So that's something, not a term ideally used in India, but in recent years it has been come along. So you would ideally assume it's a warrant, but a geofencing warrant has different implications with respect to your right to privacy as such. And these are all the things you learn in public law, technology, and governance is something which is going to come in the domain in the next few years. And it's great I have a head start in that particular field right now. Public policy, financing, and accounting for lawyers is important. Like I do not like MS Excel, but I learned it and understood the impact of finance or accounting. It's very important if you're like looking to be an infrastructure lawyer as such, or any corporate lawyer, because you will need to understand or understand the skill set of reading a balance sheet or how a firm would finance. And these things are not only from perspective of a lawyer, but of an individual who would ideally want to kickstart his own career, right? So tomorrow, if you want to make a move to like become an independent lawyer or start your own firm, finance and accounting is a must, and those basics will help you to understand all of this. So, and something about research methods is not your law school research methods. This is social research methods. So this is very different. So we went to like, so our final term for social research methods was basically going through, uh, a particular drug's efficacy and how the data and trial was done. So you would ideally understand what is the impact. So if your challenge is in the court tomorrow, you would not be only challenging it on the aspects of law, but how this trial is probably not conducted and it's a sham. So these are all things you would understand. So next slide, please. So
yeah, I'll just chip in, Anirudh, and I'll cover the skills pillar as well as the earlier expertise one. So good evening, everybody. Hope all of you are doing well. Sheetal, if you could just move to the previous slide. Actually, the expertise pillar. So it's, yeah, previous one. Yeah. So as Anirudh said, I'm a law and regulations fellow. So since I have gone through this, structured academic investigation into the regulatory state, I find it very exciting, and I would love to talk a little bit about these subjects in particular. So as we have already covered, these three pillars, the expertise pillar, the knowledge pillar, and the skills pillar is really what makes Daksha so unique, right? Coming to the evolution, like subjects like the evolution of the Indian regulatory state or something like regulation and administration, these are things which are not really exposed to us, right, during our normal graduate law degree, because we do study about the CCI, the RBI, the SEBI, but do we really know what the trend of these regulators is? Do we really conduct a sectoral wise analysis, in-depth analysis of how a regulator functions, how a regulator will be more efficient in its functioning? These are questions that were really answered in the LR pathway, I believe. Not only were we taught by legal and academic luminaries, we had Thiru sir, as we formally call him, Arun Thiruvengaram sir was there, and we had Raisa Vakil ma'am for regulation and administration. Not only that they just give us, the most exciting assignments. Our end term assignment for Raisa ma'am was actually on teleportation, and it was bizarre because when we read it, we thought that there is some spelling error, and then all of us were just discussing what is this assignment. But we had so much of fun actually going through that assignment and writing it as an end term paper. With Arun sir, we actually got the opportunity to interact with somebody who has written on critical matters of the Indian regulatory state and its evolution. These are people who have actually penned down books and are authorities on subjects like this. So learning from luminaries like that will give you a completely different insight, and interacting with them will really answer a lot of queries that and doubts that we have with respect to how the regulatory state is moving forward. Apart from this, we also had subjects such as environmental regulation, and it's not the typical environmental law that we study in law school. We would, like, some of the activities actually included us being divided into two separate groups and debating as, like, from a business versus consumer or a business versus government sort of a perspective. So my favorite activity actually was discussing about the whether a carbon tax should be imposed or not. And Himelia and I was another fellow. Both of us were arguing from one side, and then we had the government arguing against us. And it was just a very fun way of learning about different kind of argumentational styles as well as different legal principles that are involved. Now, coming to our director, our pathway director, there's just one example that I would like to give all of you to explain what expertise really means. So there is section 32 of the Indian Competition Act talks about extra territorial applicability, and there isn't a lot of literature available on this particular section. Shiju sir walks into class one day and he's carrying this 4 to 5 inch wide book, and we asked him, what is this about? He said, no, nothing, I've just written on section 32 of the Indian Competition Act. So that is the kind of expertise we really have on board. Sheetal, we could move to the next slide, please. So knowledge pillar has already been covered by Anirudh in depth. Coming to the skills pillar, which is the next slide. Nurita has somewhat covered all of these aspects, but I'll just skim through them. So the boot camps enable us to have more practical kind of skills with, negotiations. In fact, we have a tie-up with an international university, and we'll be having a very interesting negotiations boot camp shortly. Communication, as we know, is one of the most integral skills of a lawyer. Therefore, we have very interesting components here. Coming to work and well-being, this is a very exciting component, and Nurita and I have often discussed this, that this is something that's not really, talked about in the legal profession. And with Daksha really taking this forward and having us, getting an opportunity to interact with organizations such as the Alternative Story, where they help us grow and they help us so it was an entire journey on that, trying to understand how we are not in this alone, and how the pandemic is not, it's not, you can't see it in isolation. So I think during the onset of the pandemic, this component was very important for all of us Daksha fellows. I'll hand it over to Anirudh now. He will take you through the process, and then I will come back later.
I won't speak much about the process as such, but just from my experience, there are videos on the site and on the YouTube pages which talks about what the process is. But I'll just give you a brief overview. So ideally, a bachelor's degree in law, people from who have their masters have also applied. People of WorkX have applied. So if I understand there's a pandemic going, and going on, and there might be some few delays over here. So ideally contact your administration, ask them what is their expected date of graduation and final marks card issue. So that would be a good step forward. So moving on to the next slide. So how do we assess the candidate? So I'll just speak about my experience a bit more. So my final exams of graduation was yet to happen when I applied for Daksha due to the pandemic as such. So you look through, you apply, you make your entire profile on the site, then you have a written prompt, right? You have to write an essay. So I finished writing my essay on the Daksha Fellowship site. Then I got an invite for the admission test, like a very fast process in 3 days time. So I had in 3 days. So after I had like a 3 to 4 days to attempt the particular examination, which is proctored online. And I sat through the Daksha Fellowship admission test. And then I basically said I've cleared the test. Then I got my personal interview invite. And when you think about personal interviews, this is not one of them. Like this is just like a chat with two very friendly uh, professors who just talk you through. It was very calming. So I thought I was very nervous because they're like big names coming in, taking in an interview, and they're like, no, Anirudh, calm down. Like we're just like having a chat. So they would ideally assess you. They asked me what I did in my 5th year about my legal aid activities. And we were just talking about like these are few issues and this is the solution. And that was basically my interview. So that was how the Daksha Fellowship admission test went for me. Now speaking about a few other things, so there's other entrance mechanism which is the LSAT and the CLAT PG. But there are a few considerations I would ideally suggest. So one, we don't know if they're physical or online, like that is the issue. And if they are, and they might be postponed as well, right? So with the Daksha Fellowship admission test is on a rolling basis. So ideally you can take it online whenever at your comfort and get into it. So, and the other two might be postponed. So that will always be an issue. So after you create, so that's basically it. Now, if you pass your personal interview, you get your offer letter, then you accept it and then come into the fellowship for some engaging knowledge and life enriching experience. And that's what the basic Daksha Fellowship is. Yeah. Next slide, please. So these are the process. It's a fairly simple one. So just gives you an update on it. Okay. So a few more details about the fellowship test. So this is the fee structure, and financial aid is available for eligible students.
Thanks, Anirudh. So, being the verbose person that I am, my role at Daksha as a fellow is extremely beautifully encapsulated in this Bollywood dialogue, which is "Aap convince hue ya main aur bolu." It was also a part of my student engagement committee pitch, and I'm very fortunate that the co-fellows did not find it lame enough and they actually elected me. But okay, so the Daksha Fellowship is an extremely rigorous fellowship, and Nurata, Anirudh, please feel free to chip in now that we're talking about life at Daksha. I think, yeah, you both can unmute yourselves, and if there's anything that you want to add, please do. So yeah, it's a very rigorous fellowship. As you can see, it seems like we're having like very important conversations, and we are. The Daksha Conclave involved us really deliberating on specialized themes. We had panelists who were experts in those particular fields, and um, it was an amazing experience. Involved sleepless nights. I think our entire building, round the clock, there was like every team had at least one person who was awake, like 24 into 7. That's just how we were working. So of course, all these activities, howsoever rigorous they are, they do impart a lot of legal skills and knowledge. But apart from that, I think it's really helped us make friends for life, because like now I know that, like this is person A's working style, this is person B's working style. How am I supposed to work in a team? Taught me immensely about teamwork, what the other person enjoys eating. I mean, these are small things that genuinely really help in the long run. So these are pictures from the Daksha Conclave. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah. So this is a typical day in the life of a Daksha fellow. So we've already spoken about, the hybrid model and how we have had to adapt to very unprecedented times, but I would say that all of us have managed beautifully, and we have a very accommodative administration as well. So it's been quite easy for us to accommodate to this new style of learning. You can see we have had a certain online classes. Then there are certain intense discussions that we are having. You can see like the top right picture. You can see that all of us are literally sitting in a cluster, and we are so involved in a discussion. Everybody has different expressions, and that's just how a normal class and a normal day at Daksha has always been. Next slide, Shrita.
Just to like chip into what Vidushi
Yeah.
was saying about the life in, I mean, do end up having fun, but I think our entire day is just so focused towards the needs of the fellowship that somehow we end up even having fun in the at the campus itself. So like I think, for example, the reason why we added that one picture on the top right side was because here we were discussing about the intermediary routes, and it was one of the most insightful conversations we were having, like, or have had in the entire fellowship. But I remember having fun because I understood what was being argued. I understood the perspectives of every single person in that room. So I think, yeah, that was super interesting.
And I think the beauty is also that, all of us have this space wherein, so for instance, I know that Nurata and Anirudh, have this particular skill set. In fact, tonight I have a call scheduled with a co-fellow who, like, I just wanted to learn a little more about the Israel-Palestine dispute. And I just texted him and I said, listen, do you have time today? I want to understand about this. And he was like, of course, sure. So that's just how, like we have been trained over the course of these few months. Next slide, Sheila. Okay, so this is a snapshot. Like, since I'm Nurita's roommate, I know this is a snapshot from Nurita's laptop. This is how her screen looks at any point of the day, and yeah, that's just our classes actually. So those on the right side, you'll see the deadlines that we have, and next slide, please, Sheila. Okay. So now coming to the interesting and the SCC part of things. The SCC is the Student Engagement Committee, and I, along with three other members, constitute this committee. We are here for the students, and we have two other committees: the PDC, Professional Development Committee, and the RAC. So the PDC helps assist the Career Support Department, and the RAC ensures that the previous slide that we saw, those the deadlines should not really clash with each other. Now coming to Chennai as a city and how we have found Chennai as a city. Of course, Chennai has the most beautiful beaches, and we've actually had an opportunity. Daksha has actually organized surfing and kayaking for us, so we had a lot of fun learning about surfing and kayaking. Apart from that, the foodie in me has been extremely satisfied. Absolutely loved the food that Chennai had to offer. Like a typical day, since again Nurita is my roommate, a typical day for Nurita and me would be like ordering biryani from Thalla Pakat, and we know how to pronounce this, which is a feat in itself, I believe. So these are of course the outdoor activities. Sheetal, if you could move to the next slide. So a few other things that had been organized by Daksha. This is a visit to, this was an entire day out with our chancellor. If you can see Ramani sir in the background, the picture on the right. So we have, the entire day was spent with just sir, and he's really the kindest soul. And we went to Mahabalipuram. He took us to his farmhouse. We went to his private beach. We saw where the campus was being built and where Sai University in itself started. I think Nurita has a picture with the blackboard on which Daksha Fellowship was literally started. So yeah, this was an amazing day. Sheeta, next slide, please. That takes a little bit of time. There is a little bit of lag, I think. So this is another outbound activity that we had. In the morning, we went to the mongoose camp, and we actually went through this entire obstacle course. We were actually divided into teams of two, and we were supposed to compete with each other. But by the end of it, we were just after it, like everybody was just helping each other to get through all the obstacles, and it was one of the most beautiful bonding experiences that I have had, at least, because after a point nobody really cared about who's team A, team B. It was just about helping each other, bonding, and all of us were so exhausted by the end of it that we had to go to Pondicherry to relax a little bit.
Yeah,
So
I even remember at one point in the team building activity, the members of the other team were helping the members of their second team go through it, and I think it was very cool to see that.
yeah. So these three committees have already been covered. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so I believe this is the video. So just to give you a little bit of backdrop of what this video is going to be, Sheetal, you can till then like bring the screen up. Yeah. So since there are so many Main Tera versions that were going on the internet, and they've just been popular and trending, the student engagement committee was decided to bring out this video wherein we just take you through the journey that all the fellows have had at Chennai. And it was just a reminder to check on people you used to have tea with, people who were your conclave partners, or have been associated with you in some group or the other. So yeah, Sheetal, you can go ahead and play. Sheetal, I
Shikal,
only hear the audio.
we can't see the video.
Yeah, can you just share it?
You can hear it, but you can't see it, right?
Right.
No.
Okay, okay. Just give me one more minute. Just give me.
Yeah, sure, sure.
So I think we were just showing this video to you all so that because the video essentially encapsulates the entire soul or the spirit of the fellowship, because I think we've made a community, even though the first half was online from August to December, and we were together for just 3 months. I feel like we've gained friends for life because we've seen each other work through. We've seen each other from the best to, I wouldn't say the worst, but I would say that the most stressful times, the assignment submissions, the tests, the various other activities that were going on in the fellowship.
And apart from this, just life happening in the background.
Yeah,
I think.
exactly.
So with all of this, it's just been. Anirudh, you have something to say?
Sure, just like the experience is like so good, right? So good. If I don't drink any sorts of caffeine usually, like coffee or tea. But this is one dude, like at 2 a.m. in the morning, if I had some work, I would just like go across, knock on his apartment, and there he'll be at 2 a.m. grinding coffee, like physically grinding it, making
like
coffee.
he was the barista for everyone at the fellowship. He would be sitting just grinding that coffee at night.
So these are experiences, right? Like you will be probably at morning 3 a.m. you will be probably discussing out of the random, like probably they were discussing intermediary rules. Other guys will be discussing about like international commercial arbitration at 3 a.m. in the morning, and these are things you'll be considering. So it's a very weird thing to be doing at 3 a.m. in the morning, but you'll be enjoying, and that's what the fellowship experience is, right? It's more about engaging with your fellow peers and knowledge intake, and that's how it difference. Like you would ideally not be reading so much about your textbooks, but you'll be probably be reading up on work that actually matters.
And apart from that as well, I feel like things like initiatives, suppose like I have Samarthya or Corpus Juris. Just a second, Sheetal. so if I have these initiatives now, I feel I am not as excited about this anymore. But for example, Nurita will handle one part of Samarthya, and I mean, she would be more passionate about it, and she would be telling me, Doshi, we could come up with this, we could do this. And that is something that really sets the fellowship apart. Yeah, you can go ahead now, Sheetal.
So yeah, if any of you all have want to get in touch with anybody and want to know more about the fellowship, then you can um, go to the website and there are contact details there. So people will reach out to you for the information.